Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to take part in today's webinar on 24/7 access to nurses for work-related injuries. First, I have just a few housekeeping notes. We will be sharing slides today to help you follow along with the general conversation. Please submit questions at any time during the presentation, and we will answer those at the end during the question and answer period. In order to submit a question, you can just type them into the control panel under the Chat tab on the right-hand side of your screen and then hit Enter. After today's live presentation, this webinar will be available on societyinsurance.com under Risk Management and Education, and also on the Society Insurance YouTube channel. Before we begin, I would like to share a quick overview about Society Insurance. We are a regional insurance carrier based in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. We currently write business in 6 states: Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, and Tennessee. We have also been writing workers' compensation coverage since our beginning in 1915, but we also offer property and casualty coverages with extensive knowledge and experience in protecting restaurants, bars, supermarkets, convenience stores, hotels and motels, medical clinic, and artisan contractors. And just a little bit about your presenter today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Putzer. I have over 18 years of experience in the insurance industry and have exclusively handled workers' compensation claims. I've adjusted and managed claims for a diverse group of insureds ranging from family-owned businesses in the hospitality and service industries to large manufacturers. I hold the Associate in Claims Management, Associate in Insurance Services, and Associate in General Insurance designations. I'm joined today by Blair Arndt and Frank Norton from our Risk Control Department.
Good morning. This is Blair Arndt, and I have been a risk control rep for Society Insurance for 14 years. Plus, I have an additional 10 years of experience in the loss control, risk control area. My territory for Society is southwestern, south central Wisconsin.
Hi, I'm Frank Norton, and I will be your third presenter today. I am a senior loss control consultant, and my job is to work with Society's policyholders to reduce hazards that could develop into claims. My work territory with Society encompasses the states of Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa. I have worked in risk control for over 30 years. While protecting the health of your employees is the #1 priority of every business, no business is injury-proof. Accidents can happen even with the proper safety procedures and training in place. Sometimes workplace injuries require a trip to the emergency room. However, in non-emergency situations, a nurse triage program is a valuable resource to help achieve the best possible outcome for everyone involved. In this webinar, we will address what nurse triage is, how it works, and the benefits of a nurse triage program.
Let's get started with a poll question. This will help us give us an idea of where people are on the topic and what needs to be covered. The question is, have you ever heard of Society Insurance program for access to nurses for work-related injuries? Did you know it existed? We're looking for a yes or no answer. Please go ahead.
Okay, it looks like we have some results coming back. Our program has been in place for over 5 years. It's available in all our states that we currently do business in. And it's really, we view it as a true added feature for our policyholders. So first things first, if a work injury does occur, you should respond appropriately to any and every workplace injury. This includes making sure that the immediate needs of the injured workers are addressed. The injury is an emergency. Someone should call 911 and ensure necessary care is available right away for the injured worker. Equally as important is always report your work incidents to your insurance company, even if the injured worker does not intend to seek care. By doing this, you help us create, quote unquote, a record of what happened. This can be extremely helpful to all parties if 6 months down the road, the injured worker decides they'd like to see a doctor for what happened 6 months earlier. This helps eliminate the doubt that is often associated with injuries where the immediate treatment is not sought. An additional note of this is that these claims, quote unquote, do not cost you, as these record-only claims, there is no money put on them, or what we call reserves. Therefore, these don't impact your modification or experience factors. Have any of you ever had a family member who became sick or was injured at home? How bad were the issues? Many times you were probably left deciding what to do. Do you go to an urgent care clinic or the emergency room? Did your issues occur on the weekend or after hours? How much did it cost you if you did decide to seek care? During regular office hours, many of you have probably reached out to your primary medical provider for advice by phone regarding what to do. That doctor or their nurse, quote unquote, triaged the issues and provided medical guidance. Perhaps they suggested things for you to try at home. Other times they encouraged you to seek care and perhaps told you where you should be seen. When an injury occurs at work, many employees aren't sure what to do either. They are faced with the same questions we faced when we decided what was best for our family member. What care do I need? Do I need to be seen? This is when a nurse triage program is a valuable resource. So here's how it works. When a work-related injury occurs, the injured worker contacts their supervisor to report their incident or injury. Then together, the supervisor and the injured worker call the society 24/7 Nurse Triage hotline number at 877-501-3050. Our 24/7 Nurse Triage provides a valuable option to an employee for any non-emergent injuries where an injured worker has yet to seek care and is deciding if they need care or not. This program really doesn't benefit an injured worker or their employer if the injured worker has already sought care for their injuries or if obvious immediate medical treatment is needed. The injured worker has sought or will be seeking immediate care. Those claims should be submitted through the normal workers' compensation claims reporting process. This ensures a claims representative can address the needs of the injured worker as soon as possible. So what does the registered nurse do? When you call the nurse triage line, you'll be connected with a registered nurse 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The nurse will gather information about the injury and triage the issues. Next, the nurse will make recommendations for either self-care if appropriate. This is to avoid unnecessary care for the injured worker and unnecessary expense for the employer. If treatment is needed for the injuries, the nurse will make recommendations on how and where to get the best possible care at the lowest possible price. With the information gathered during your phone call, the triage nurse will document the first report of injury, or Froy, including claim facts. The Froy is a necessary step for any and every work-related injury. It's immediately sent to the employer and society. The recipients who receive the Froy can be customized to meet the employer's needs. Instructions for care are verbally provided to the injured worker and also sent via email to society and the employer. Finally, upon receiving the Froy, Society Insurance begins their claims investigation. Within 24 to 48 hours, the triage nurse completes a follow-up call to the injured worker to assess the status, satisfaction, and to provide additional education if needed. The triage nurse documents the activities from the follow-up call and notifies society regarding the information. So what are some of the benefits of the program? A 24/7 nurse triage program has benefits for employees and employers. Let's start with employees. When the injured worker is in contact with a triage nurse, they're getting valuable information about their injuries and medical needs. This allows them to make an informed decision about their care after an injury. This insight and follow-up from a registered nurse helps provide peace of mind for the injured worker. Plus, your involvement as an employer shows the injured worker that you care about their well-being and are committed to their best possible outcome.
Okay, let's do another poll question. Poll question is, what is the cost of using society's program for the 24/7 access to nurses for work-related injuries? Multiple choice here again. What do you think? For each time you use society's nurse triage program, is the cost $0 to $100, $100 to $250, or $250 to $500? Please go ahead. Okay, the answer is $0 is the cost to the policyholders. What do you think about that? This is no cost option to direct treatment for non-emergent work-related injuries, and it's right at your fingertips when you need it.
So let's talk about some of the benefits for the employers. A nurse triage program may help reduce workers' compensation claims costs and the number of claim incidents. Let's talk about that a little bit more. When that injured worker and their supervisor call into the triage nurse, if the triage nurse determines that the injured worker can best be treated by doing some things at home, perhaps over-the-counter medications, alternating between ice and heat for a simple sprain, there's no impact of that claim on the employer. The only time we at society will actually put reserves or money on a claim is where we know the injured worker will be seeking active care. This provides a streamlined process for reporting claims and provides peace of mind for you knowing that your injured workers are getting the care they need. Your involvement shows the injured worker that you, as their employer, care about them. And again, there is no cost to use the program. Here's some important things to remember about the program. The triage nurse's only concern is the needs of the injured worker. The triage nurse does not and cannot make any decisions about the facts of the case or whether the injury is compensable or will be accepted. That's not their position here. The triage program should not be used if the injured worker is not available to talk during the phone call, as their issues are the ones that are going to be triaged. If the injured worker has already sought medical care, the program should not be used. And finally, in emergency situations where the injured worker is in obvious need of immediate medical care, the program should not be used and immediate medical treatment should be sought.
There are resources available for your business to learn more. There are some handouts attached here. You can download them from the webinar control panel now. After the live webinar, you can find the handouts, videos, and tips about nurse triage and workers' compensation at societyinsurance.com. Click on Risk Management or Blog. There'll be two handouts located there pertaining to this webinar. One is Nurse Triage 24/7 with a phone number, and the other one is a Nurse Triage poster. All right, we would like to take some time now to answer your questions. Again, you can type them into the webinar control panel on the right where you see chat and hit return. Feel free to send them now if you haven't done so already, and we'll do our best to answer them for everyone.
One question that we received is, can you speak to the states where directing care is not allowed? One of the things that's allowed in workers' compensation in the states, there's states where we can direct care, meaning we can tell as the insurance carrier where we would like the injured worker to be seen. And then there's certain states where we cannot direct care. The question here has to do with where we cannot direct care. After an injury occurs, we always have the option to do what we call soft direct a worker for care. In this case, the triage nurse is going to make recommendations to that injured worker. They're going to make recommendations regarding whether or not they feel their issues can be treated at home or whether or not they should be seen for care. If the recommendation is that they be seen for care, the nurse will make recommendations where the injured worker can be seen, but will never tell the injured worker they have to be seen there. The decision's still left up to the injured worker. We have one other question that's coming up. Any concerns if the employer is a temp agency and the supervisor is a client site supervisor? No, absolutely not. The biggest or the one key ingredient in this process is the injured worker themselves. We like it if a supervisor is available because the supervisor sometimes can help speak to the facts of the injury itself, which in turn can help the triage nurse triage the injuries. If there's a mechanism of injury involved, sometimes the supervisor can be of assistance in that process. But the key component in this is the injured worker. If the injured worker is not available, the call is not really worthwhile.
I have another question here that came up, Jim. Any other ways to contact the nurse other than by phone?
Right now there's not, and probably the one process we want due to the immediacy of it is that phone call to occur. Because again, the nurse is going to have a much better understanding by being able to ask questions directly to that injured worker versus say through a chat session or versus some type of online form.
And one more question. How long does the triage nurse stay involved with the process? When does that nurse drop off?
The triage nurse initially, once that triage calls occurs, will place a follow-up call to that injured worker, usually within 24 to 48 hours after that initial call. And she could do one of two calls. She could follow up with the injured worker if the injured worker decided they were going to try some things at home, or she'll also follow up with the injured worker to see how their treatment's going if she suggested a certain course of treatment for them where they were actually seen. Usually after 48 hours or so, that nurse drops out of the process. And if an additional field nurse or a telephonic nurse is needed as part of that claim, that becomes our responsibility and away from that triage nurse, so to speak. Another question that came in is the employer able to provide notes to triage nurses about internal policies, process, and direct next steps to follow up after medical treatment? As it relates to, say, for example, return to work, if there's a return to work or light duty available that the employer has, absolutely. We can, what we say, onboard an employer, meaning we can provide all this information to a nurse ahead of time. So when that employer calls in with that injured worker, that's already on file for that nurse. Again, there's certain things that the nurse will not or cannot address. Drug testing is a classic one that comes into play. We can let the nurse know that an employer, for example, may want drug testing to be done, and the nurse can communicate that to the medical provider, but we have to be careful how far that nurse gets into a process, say for something like that. But regarding any type of light duty, any type of return to work, yes, we like that information ahead of time for the nurse. Looks like we have another question. I saw one of the questions that came in before was, does the nurse have access to, say, for example, multiple different languages? And the answer is yes. We have Spanish that we've seen. We have a good cross-section of our employers down in Chicago where we've run into Polish, any of a number of different Hmong languages, any of a number of different languages. Those nurses have access to translation services that they can use when that call comes in. Another question that came in, does the worker need information such as policy number in order to use triage? Does the company receive numbers of use? Regarding the first one, policy number, it is helpful. The nurse will still take any information they get if we know, if, for example, the employer or the injured worker knows that we are the work comp carrier and they call in and say, Society Insurance is our workers' compensation carrier, I'd like to report a claim, we can take steps after the fact to put that policy number to that incident. But yes, the policy number is helpful. The other question was, does the company receive numbers of use? We can provide, like, say for example, a loss run that would indicate that. If you're looking for something a little bit more customized or streamlined regarding usage, we could provide that as well on a monthly basis. The next question is, does a nurse follow up with the clinic where the employee goes for initial treatment to get return to work paperwork, etc.? Typically, as a rule, this claim is coming to us, meaning the adjusters, pretty quickly. So we're likely going to be the ones that are placing that follow-up call. Once we get a claim on our desk and we know that there's a question regarding possible return to work issues, our requirement is that we're reaching out to the injured worker, the employer, and most importantly, the medical provider within 24 hours for an update. So to answer that question directly, they may, but that follow-up call is likely going to come from society itself. Next question is, does the nurse follow up with the clinic where the employee goes for initial treatment? I think we kind of answered that one already. The answer is no, that comes from us more so than it would come from the triage nurse. Let me see if we have any other questions in here yet.
I think that's all the questions.
That appears to be the end of any of the questions. Frank?
Thank you again for joining us today. I truly hope this information has been helpful and that you know more about Society's 24/7 access to nurses for work-related injuries. We'll be sending a follow-up survey via email shortly and appreciate your feedback. Society Insurance will host another free webinar in June on business video surveillance best practices, and more webinars will be added to the calendar for 2019. Please watch your email and our website and social media for announcements. To learn more about how Society can protect your business, visit societyinsurance.com. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.